So this talk is a method for using processes to improve the quality of software. So ensuring the high quality of software produced by or within an organisation should be a goal, as should doing it right the first time to reduce time and cost. The use of process and of management systems to meet international standards has already been found by organisations making physical items to be essential. But it's equally useful for the making of software and for the provision of software services. However, these processes and their management systems need to be tailored for the IT industry and its increasing number of standards. This presentation looks at why software needs processes and considers how a well-proven management framework can be used in the design of the processes and of the management system to achieve these objectives. So my name is Susan Turner. As Margaret said, I'm a consultant in software quality and business process analysis. In my time, I've been responsible for implementing and improving business management systems in small software companies and the software-oriented divisions of large companies, mapping their processes and making them available to staff. My background, however, is in software. I started in the 1980s with a Spearfish torpedo and moved into quality in the early 1990s, but always writing software applications to assist in the maintenance of management systems. My last permanent role was 3 years ago as a quality manager before I left to become a consultant. I'm a member of the International Ticket Plus Association, assisting in producing the scheme and guidance documentation for Ticket Plus, and I'm a trained Ticket Plus capability practitioner. You'll find out what that actually means later on. In my spare time, what I have left, I maintain the websites for Ticket Plus and for two family history charities. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to introduce you to 3 words. These definitions, the definitions of these words have been taken from ISO 9000 2015, Quality Management Systems, Fundamentals and Vocabulary. So the first one is quality, and that's the degree to which a set of inherent characteristics of an object fulfills requirements, which means that it's defining quality as a quantity. So we can have low quality or high quality, but I think you'd agree we want high quality software. So process is a set of interrelated or interacting activities that use inputs to deliver an intended result. A management system is a set of interrelated or interacting elements of an organisation to establish policies and objectives and processes to achieve those objectives. So what do we mean by quality of software? Software's always been intangible. You can't touch it like you can physical things, and to a lot of older people out there, it's magic. To a lot of the younger people, it's invisible. Smartphones are a nice piece of hardware, but few people consider the software inside that makes it work. But as we know, software is all around us and its quality matters. Cars used to be purely mechanical things, but now software does a lot of the work. And if the software doesn't work properly, cars can be lethal. So when we're looking at the quality of software, it usually boils down to 4 things. How good are the people doing the work? Are they correctly skilled for the job they're doing? Do they understand what they're doing and why? How good are the tools they're using? Have they been trained to use those tools correctly and for the right purposes? How good are the processes? How well understood are they by staff? And finally, how well documented are the processes? The time taken to introduce new staff into a project can be reduced if they have something to refer to, rather than just having to pick up the processes from what they're told. The verbal transfer of knowledge can also maintain incorrect processes. Like, for example, that's what I was told when I started this project. The use of Agile in any of its forms is seen as a well-defined process, but each organisation and sometimes each project may use it in a different way, and that needs to be documented. The transfer of staff between projects that use different versions can result in lost time and additional cost. So we're still talking cost and money. So our definition of defining of the process was a set of interrelated or interacting activities that use inputs to deliver an intended result. Now, processes can be short or long and can be at all levels in the organisation. We might have an overall process for creating a new product, which has broad statements like define the requirements, design the product, make the product, ship the product, each of which would have detailed processes for each part of the overall process. For example, recording and performing and recording unit testing. But whatever the granularity of the process, we first need to look at what is the intended result of the process. This could be a successful unit test. We need to look at the inputs. What do we need to perform the tests? So in the case of unit testing, we could include the unit item under test, the specification of the test that must be performed, and any tools we need to do the testing. What are the outputs? These provide the evidence that the process has met its intended results. So in this case, it would be the test results. We need to consider what are the steps in order to achieve the intended results from the inputs. Depending on the level of the process and the required skills of the person performing the process, there may be few or many test results. Excuse me while I display. We need to document the process. In order to ensure the high quality of the ultimate product or service, we need to be able to repeat this process over and over consistently, so it needs to be written down. The problem is that the person who's been doing the process for years may see no reason why they need to write it down as they know what to do. They may think you're insulting the intelligence or belittling their skills. If they write it down, then someone else might be given the task to do and they could be moved on to something more difficult. However, they don't see that at the very least it's a safeguard for the organisation in case that person wins the lottery and doesn't come back and the organisation has to train someone new in the process. Finally, the process should be reviewed on a regular basis to see if it can be improved. Can we reduce the costs or the time while maintaining the quality? This is another reason for documenting the process, as it's difficult to improve the process if you don't know what it is. So if we look at management systems, our definition before was a set of interrelated or interacting elements of an organisation to establish policies and objectives and processes to achieve those objectives. So we've talked about what our processes are, but where can we put them and can we ensure we have them all? There we are. So there are many different standards for management systems, depending on what the organisation does. Each of these management system standards provide requirements that must be met by the processes, and so provide an organisation with a list of the processes that they need. So these are some of the standards. ISO 9001 is probably the best known as intended for any organisation that produces something or provides a service, and it's to ensure the quality of that product or service. IT Information Security Management Standard enables organisations to manage the security of assets like financial information, intellectual property, and employee details. IT Service Management System Standards is for organisations that provide IT services. There are also organisations that need to meet multiple standards, and they may have an integrated management system. Process for the various standards are integrated as there are some aspects of all the standards that are the same. The International Standards Organization, the ISO, to whom most of these standards belong, has been revamping its management system standards over the last 10 years to make the bulk of each standard the same, with specifics for each type of standard in one or two sections. And an organisation can be certified against these standards. This provides their customers with the assurance of the quality of the goods and services. Certification requires assessment against the relevant standard by assessors from accredited third parties like BSI, DNV and LRQA. Should mention that not all management systems are certified. An organisation may just have a very good management system in a sector that doesn't have any specific standards or doesn't have customers that demand evidence of the adherence to those standards. So what has been found, and software is a case in point, is that ISO 9001 is very generic. And so various sectors have included standards and guidance. Some, like those for medical devices and railway applications, are ISO standards, but there are some independent sector-specific ones. So for automobile, IATF 1649, which is from the International Automotive Task Force. AS 9100 is from the International Aerospace Quality Group, and Ticket Plus for software is maintained by the International Ticket Plus Association. Now, those three, the latter three, although they are on ISO standards, they are well understood within their sectors and supply chains. So what I like to look at is Ticket Plus, and that's the method that I am suggesting for defining processes to improve the quality of the software. Ticket Plus is an improvement and extension of a scheme called Ticket. Ticket was a project sponsored by the Department of Trade and Industry in 1991 to provide guidance material for the interpretation of the current ISO 9001 standard for software. ISO 9001 at that time was geared towards large-scale manufacture using statistical techniques to ensure that each item that was produced was the same. This made it difficult to use for software, as only one copy of the product is produced, and then that will then go on to copying onto media, but that's a totally different process. So within the Ticket scheme, you could get yourself certified against ISO 9001 with Ticket, and the Ticket Plus would, the Ticket would be on your certificate. However, by 2006, with the ISO 9001 standard having changed considerably, the Ticket scheme was not really fitting its purpose, so it's decided to review and improve it. It took 5 years, and Ticket Plus was introduced in 2011. After a 3-year transition period for those companies which were already certified to Ticket to be reassessed against Ticket Plus, Ticket scheme was retired at the end of November 2014. So while Ticket provided guidance for interpreting ISO 9001 for software, Ticket Plus is wider in scope, as it provides requirements for 5 standards: ISO 9001, ISO IEC 20000, ISO 27001, BS 10754, and ISO 262. So again, certification is to ISO 9001 with Ticket Plus and with any of those standards if you need them. Ticket Plus also improved the certification process. Instead of a simple pass-fail of the same criteria for ISO 9000 for an ISO 9001 assessment, Ticket Plus has a number of capability levels that can show how an organisation is improving. So the capability levels are start at foundation, which is the entrance level, and that checks that the organisation has identified processes and is operating those processes correctly. Bronze is about managing the process. So the processes are written down, but they may be specific for each project or department. Silver is about establishing the process. That is, there is a management system to put the processes in, and there are standard processes with limited variations if required for projects, but they are limited. For those who know what CMMI is, this is the equivalent of CMMI level 3. Then the gold and platinum levels are maturity levels, where metrics are used for process improvement. The Ticket Plus certification process also has an additional role, that of practitioner. They're trained like the assessors of the third-party companies in the standard, but they belong to the organisation or are contracted to the organisation, and they provide advice and assistance in ensuring that the management system meets Ticket Plus. And finally, the method by which the assessment is run is also changed. The traditional method of the assessors finding correlating evidence during the assessment, Ticket Plus calls this the exploration mode, can be replaced wholly or in part by the practitioner collating and validating all the evidence in advance, and then the assessor just confirms the evidence, so it's known as confirmation mode. So confirmation mode requires fewer interviews and less time, so it can be cheaper, but then you have the cost of the practitioner. So like the standards, Ticket Plus provides a list of requirements that you need to meet. The base process library, which contains all of these, contains 40 base processes, and they're divided into 6 categories: organizational, project, technical, agreement, IT specific, and maturity. Now, luckily, not all of the 40 base processes will be required. They depend on the organization's scope of certification and the capability level that they want to go for. There are 8 scope profiles which allow you to choose your the standards you're interested in. So if you're involved in software development, you choose something, you probably choose system and software development and support. And this therefore would reduce the 40 base processes down to 21, which is good. But 21 still seems a lot, but it's not as bad as it sounds. So we have 4 types of processes. We have mandatory base processes, which are divided into there are 9 mandatory base processes, the type A's. Type B processes are that are mandatory for the chosen scope profile. So whichever of the 8 scope profiles whichever of the 8 scope profiles you have chosen, you'll have a number of mandatory processes. For systems and software development and support, there are 12. The type C processes are all the other base processes that are not mandatory, and you can have those, choose those if your system requires it or would find it useful. And finally, if you're going for gold or platinum, there are 2 type M processes, which are related to metrics. So if we look at the mandatory processes, the type A's, these are ones that cover all the things which will happen regardless of your scope profile. So Org 1 looks at human resource management. So resourcing, recruitment, induction, assessment, and development. Org 2, the management framework, looks at your management system and how you're setting it up and how you're maintaining it. Corporate management and legal is about top management, which is in ISO anyway, and how they manage the business, including the business plan. ISO doesn't actually look at that. ISO 9001 doesn't look at that. Ticket Plus considers this as an integral part of the management system. Org 4 looks at the environment, from the work environment to the software tools. Org 5 is about improvement. Ticket Plus expects that there will always be improvement. Org 7 is looking at management, is measurement and analysis, and it's required to provide information to enable better decision making. Org 7, the customer focus, deals with maintaining a positive relationship with the customer. And Org 8 looks at how risks are managed. Finally, Tech 1 is about the management of all data and records, where data actually includes paper documentation as well as electronic data. So if we look at the mandatory processes, the type Bs for the systems and software development and support profile, these are the other 12. Org 10 is lifecycle model management. So Ticket Plus recognises that not all projects and programs within a company have the same life cycle. Some use waterfall, some use agile. Lifecycle model management requires you to define and manage each type of model. The 3 Project-based processes cover the management of the project or the program, of configuration, change management, and how problems and incidents are reported and dealt with. The 8 tech-based processes look at the life cycle from stakeholder requirements right at the beginning through to the release to the customer or to media manufacturing. So if you're old school and providing it on CD, then Tech 6 will look at how you release to your manufacturing process. Now, the optional processes, which are all the other 17 for systems and software development and support, may be chosen if you want to use them. So if, for example, you are creating bespoke software for an individual customer, you may want to use to include maintenance management to show the customer that you have defined processes for dealing with any issues or new requirements that the customer might have. The agreement-based processes may be included if there's a supply chain which has to be managed. For example, where part of the design or the testing is subcontracted to another organisation, or where purchased items are included in the product. All the base processes that you choose are listed on your ISO 9001 and Ticket Plus certificate. So the base processes are divided into base practices, which provide more granularity. So, for example, the Tech 14, which is a development implementation, has 5 base practices, and they're looking at establishing the development environment that you're going to use, identifying your component sources, designing the components, implementing those components, and then manage subsequent changes to the detailed design and product components. So if we look at what, say, BP3 looks like, here we have the requirements and the clauses. In addition to those requirements and clauses, the Ticket Plus includes the input work products and the output work products that they expect you to have. So in this case, we would expect to have the architectural design from Tech 13, the architectural design based process. System requirements from Tech 11, the requirement analysis based process. And then the outputs would be the detailed design, which goes to Tech 15 BP4, implement components, and traceability report, which will be an input into Tech 1, which was the data management. In addition, each base practice is cross-referenced to the standards. So in this case, we have the ISO 9000 clauses that are relevant, which are 7.5, which is documented information, 823, which is review of the requirements for products and services, and 8.3.5, design and development outputs. Now, if there were any of the other 4 processes in there, they will be in the base process library. So that's what Ticket Plus provides for you. But what you also need to look at is you need to be able to cross-reference this, the requirements and the clauses and the work input and output work products with your actual quality management, your management system. It is not expected that you would have your management system exactly matching all the clauses within Ticket Plus. And you may not even call your input and output work products the same thing. So what Ticket Plus expects you to have is called the process reference model. And this, so the part at the top is our BP3, and the part at the bottom is your own processes. So in this case, the organisation has two processes, 05001 and 05002, which wholly or in part meet the requirements for BP3. And their work products are the software design specification document and the requirements stored in DAWS. And their outputs are the detailed design in Enterprise Architect and the verification cross-reference matrix. So they are not exactly this, they don't have to have the same name as Ticket Plus uses, but you need to have a process reference model that allows you to go from one to the other. So, summary of this is, if you want high quality software and services, you need to have documented processes. In order to get those, you need to have a management system, and you can choose several of the system standards for your management system. So there is more information on the Ticket Plus website. It gives you information on the training and the training companies, what certification is all about, the scheme documentation and guidance, which are all free to access, the organisations which are certified to Ticket Plus, and there are 98 currently, and the certification bodies who will provide you with your assessments. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, and my email is given below. Thank you.